T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
In this special edition of the Citizens of Tech podcast, we go electric. That is, one of our hosts has bought himself an electric vehicle, and that host is not me. I am Ethan Banks at EC Banks on Twitter, and my co-host now driving a snazzy electric car is Eric Zutphin at Zutphin. By the way, are you a Redditor? Because we are. Eric created a Citizens of Tech sub. Just search for it by name on reddit.com. We'll keep throwing stuff in there about the show and other cool stuff we find, including some of the bits we consider that maybe never quite make the show. Hope to see you on Reddit and hope to hear your contributions, things maybe we should be talking about on this podcast. And now on with the show for today. Eric, you went and bought yourself an electric car, and I'm going to interview you all about that.
Sounds like a plan to me.
So let's start at the beginning here. Let's not even talk about the car you have yet. Let's go back in time a little bit, because you and I have been talking about electric cars for a long time. It's something that's really been interesting to you. How come? What's the big grab?
Yeah, even before we started the Citizens of Tech podcast, I think we were talking about electric cars.
Yeah.
So the big draw, I guess, for me was the idea originally as a child where I got a kit. I got access to a solar toy car kit and just thought, this is the coolest thing in the world. Like, the sun shines on this and the car goes. Mm-hmm. And so, further down the line here, electric vehicles just seemed really cool to me. You pop batteries in this thing. RC cars were a ton of fun. You charge up the battery, you pop it in, you have a good time.
Well, there's a nerd factor, but there's more to it with you, I think. There's you seem kind of like energy conscious, concerned about how energy is being expended and all that.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten older, it's become more and more prevalent in my mind. So yeah, it's become a lot of, well, if I don't have to burn fossil fuels, why would I? I guess is the big question that I kept asking myself.
Are you a hippie, Eric?
I think I might be becoming a hippie. My hair's too short.
That it is. So I get it. They're really cool. It is amazing technology, which fascinated you. And there's an environmental aspect of it as well. Maybe not of the tree hugging hippie variety, but certainly it's kind of become obvious to all of us in the world that burning fossil fuels is got a limited lifespan if nothing else, and so we got to move to something else. Electric vehicles are certainly a step in the right direction. You're still burning something somewhere probably to produce the electricity, but
more than likely, unless you have a solar powered charging array.
But things are more efficient. Things are more efficient in an electric vehicle by and large.
Right.
Now, then the question becomes, well, all right, if you're interested in EV, in modern America, we live in rural New Hampshire. We're not city dwellers. You got to drive to get anywhere around here. How do you pick the right vehicle? And so let's pick on a few vehicles. For example, you talked about the Nissan Leaf, that you never ended up going with a Leaf. Could you talk about that car and why that didn't work for you?
Yeah, so the Nissan Leaf comes in currently two sort of models as far as range. There's the entry level, which has a battery pack that will get you an EPA rated, or estimated rather, 84 miles on a charge. Okay, that sounds fine. That would actually cover my commute to work and back, unless it's winter, because you get reduced range from the battery pack. You have to run your defrost. You have to run your climate control.
All those electrics bleed off your mileage?
Big time. So the base model was basically a non-starter. There were some pretty good deals recently on the base model Leaf. But again, that range anxiety term comes up where I just didn't see it happening in the winter, being able to get there and back again if I couldn't charge while I was at work. So,
and 84 miles, even for where you work, is kind of pushing it.
Yeah, so I drive about 32 miles one way to work, so that's 64-ish, 65.
So leaving you with some headroom, but not a lot.
Yeah, not an awful lot.
If someone says, hey, Eric, you want to go to lunch? You're going, yeah, we're going to take your car.
Yeah, you're driving. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So the base model Leaf was out of the question. There's currently another model with a larger battery pack that goes around 110-ish miles on a charge. Again, that's in warm weather. That's not cold weather. In warm weather, if you want to run the AC, that saps your range. So, yes, that would have been viable for my commute. But if I wanted to drive to Boston and back on it, I would have had to charge while I was in
Well,
Boston.
you're in Boston, yep.
So that was sort of out. You know, the Tesla's just out of my price range.
Well, the Model 3, though.
In 3 years, when it's available to purchase, sure.
So not willing to wait that long for Elon Musk's promise that this thing's even going to be there for.
I
you.
mean, I have no doubt, based on their execution with the Model S, that it's going to happen. The question is, when could I purchase one? And, you know, what is the payment plan going to look like? And there's so many unknowns, and it's at minimum 2 years away, more like 3 probably for people that didn't pre-order.
At last count, it was around 350 or 60,000 vehicles had been pre-ordered and spoken for.
And they weren't even
was
sure how
long.
they were going to fulfill that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that
fair
factored
enough.
in there.
Okay. So Toyota, the Prius. There's a million of them on the road. They've got a long history. Arguably, it's the most developed hybrid drivetrain on the road today. And I know you were looking very seriously at one of those.
Yeah. So I actually have a 2012 Prius V that we use as our family car because it seats all of us, and the kids' car seats fit in there, and there's some storage. It's just big enough. We downsized from a minivan. And it's great. It's great at what it does, but it's not an EV. It's not.
It's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid.
It is a primarily gas-powered
primarily
vehicle.
runs off of gas and gets, economy boosts from the battery pack. If you're really careful and your terrain is really flat, you can operate in EV mode for extended periods. Like, my home area, Union Road and Sandoggerty, I can go all EV on those 2 roads, no problem. But if you get up any kind of incline, the gas engine has to kick in. There just isn't a large enough.
It's a battery pack. It's a hybrid drivetrain. It is not a primarily battery-driven
Correct.
vehicle.
It's a supplemental electric system.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough.
So the Prius, I was looking at Priuses,
Prian?
multiple Prius cars. The Model C was the most appealing to me because it gets the best mileage.
Up in the 50s?
Yeah, I
50
think
mile per gallon?
it's like 51 is the combined, something like that. So I was looking at that, but hardly anyone had any in stock, and I sent out some inquiries and got some responses. We don't have any in stock, or we're not open on this day, because all of this happened in a period of less than a week. I decided, it's time for a new car. I want something fuel efficient. Ultimately, I would like to get an EV.
And so your eyes were cast upon the Chevy Volt, which if you were listening to show 36, you would have heard Eric mention that car.
Correct.
So you are now the proud owner of a 2017 Chevrolet Volt.
Technically, I'm the proud leaser of a 2017, but yes, Chevy Volt. That the Chevy Volt, for some reason, well, I know the reason why I never really considered the Chevy Volt. And I saw that it was one of the questions on your sheet. But the reason I never really considered the Chevy Volt is because, honestly, it's a Chevy.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know why your reasons. I can tell you my reasons.
Sure.
Because when I growing up as a kid in the 80s and even into the 90s, General Motors products were terrible. A lot of bad reputation for reliability, poorly manufactured, some horribly designed automobiles foisted upon an unsuspecting public. My poor dad had a GM product that was nothing but a headache to him, and he swore off of them after that. And even today, that stigma carries over, where I look at a Chevy and go, ew, it's a GM product.
Exactly. Bingo. Nailed it. That's exactly my reasoning. I had 3 domestic vehicles as my first 3 vehicles. They happened to be Fords, but Ford was no different really than Chevy back in the 80s and 90s. The build quality was terrible. You never quite knew what you were getting yourself into, what was going to fall off, stop working, break down.
You bought a Japanese car if you want a reliability.
You bought Japanese or Korean, even,
Yep.
Even in the
Later
90s.
on,
Yep. A Hyundai or whatever,
Hyundai and Kia coming on strong at that point. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's honestly why I never even considered the Chevy Volt. I had read a little bit about it. It sounded like cool tech, but it was a Chevy, so I never really gave it the time of day, if I'm honest.
All right, so what about the Volt was like, you're like, okay, I'm going to look at this thing.
So the biggest contributing factor was the fact that it's a plug-in hybrid. In 2017, they upgraded the battery pack and the efficiency such that it gets an EPA estimated 53 miles on a charge, which doesn't quite cover my entire commute. But the good thing about the Volt is it has a gas generator engine on board. It has a 9-ish gallon tank. It gets about 42 miles per gallon. So if you run out of electricity, this 1.5 liter engine kicks in, starts generating
It makes more electricity for you.
charges the battery, powers the wheels.
So this is why it's different than a Prius, because the Volt truly is an EV. The drivetrain is EV.
Correct.
But the engine, again, is not driving the vehicle. It is supplying electricity to the battery and the electric drivetrain, which drives the vehicle.
Yep. So if you're monitoring, it has an 8-inch touchscreen monitor that you can do, any number of functions with. But usually, I'm monitoring energy expenditure and regen. It'll show you, okay, the engine is running right now, and that's powering the electric motors. And then you'll hit a straightaway where the engine is producing more electricity than the motors actually require, and it starts trickle charging the battery at the same time as powering the electric motors. And then you're going up a hill, maybe, the engine is only powering the electric motors, or maybe the battery kicks in a little bit too to supplement, because there's actually 2 electric motors on the Volt.
So this is a different way to approach the range anxiety problem than Tesla does. Tesla will just load their cars with batteries and batteries and batteries and batteries to
Correct.
give you the range, and you pay dearly for that privilege.
Yep.
The Volt's approach is, we're going to keep the same battery pack and the drivetrain's going to be the same, just we're going to burn fuel to create, with a very efficient engine,
Right.
to create the electricity.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a way of keeping it a pure, quote unquote, pure EV, because it's only driven by electric motors, while having that backup plan. If you exceed the charge level of your batteries, you're not stranded. You can burn fossil fuels and power this thing. So it gives you the flexibility of a gas-powered vehicle, while you have the option of, or the ability to, drive completely on electricity if you have access to charging points.
Okay. So now you're leasing this thing. Do you get any tax breaks on this vehicle
No, the tax breaks went to the dealer.
because you're leasing?
Correct.
So if you had bought it, then there would be some sort of EV tax credit that you're still eligible
Correct.
for?
There's a federal tax benefit. I believe it's $7,500 that goes against the value of the car. But since Chevy owns my car and I lease it from them, they get it.
Okay.
It was written off on my, the total bill for the car. In fact, that then factored into my lease. But it effectively lowered the value of the car, or the price of the car, $7,500.
So talk about let's talk about some of the other aspects of the drivetrain. We talked about the motor, the battery pack, and the electric motors that drive this thing. So one question, how many electric motors are in it?
So it has 2, one of which has the sort of standard rare earth mineral magnet system, which is highly efficient, generates more power out of the electricity. And then there's one that is less impactful to, the mining of rare earth minerals. It contains a more standard magnetic drive, and they sort of work in tandem. To be honest, I don't know which one is the primary and which one is the secondary, but they work in tandem to power this thing to also to regen.
So it's not simply like motors at the corners driving wheels directly, which is maybe my shallow understanding, but more how I think of the Tesla and some of the sports cars I've seen, like the exotics, like the Porsche 918, I think, is
Right,
more like
one
that.
motor per wheel, sort
Right.
of. Yeah, no, it's not like that. There is actually a method of using these individually and then in tandem for the different demands.
So is there a transmission of some sort then that
Kind
couples
of.
those?
I will confess my ignorance as to exactly how they are set up at this
There
point.
is some kind of a transmission.
Correct.
Then, as opposed to okay.
And
That's
it's
gonna help
some
gauge that
variation
knowledge.
of a continuously variable gear system.
What else is weird about the drivetrain? I mean, are the tires anything special?
The tires are low rolling resistance. They're relatively high PSI. Nothing incredible. GM recommends 36 to 38 pounds.
Not exotic pressures.
No,
little high.
and I've done some reading, and most people say, GM engineers know what they're talking about, go with what they're recommending. But a lot of people have said, 38 is good, 40 is good. I run mine at 41 because I get slightly better efficiency, and I don't mind a little harsher ride. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess the risk there, if you overinflate the tire, maybe you get funny tire wear.
Yeah.
you could start to on an overinflated tire, you'd get some wear in the middle. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
Uneven wear.
varying levels of people saying 36. I get weird, wear on the outsides of the tire, so I run mine at 39, and that seems to be very even. And it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Sure.
But
so
it's
long story short, they're nothing really weird.
no, and that's the big thing about it is it's a normal car. It just happens to be driven a little bit differently. And there was actually just recently an article about that, how the 2017 Volt makes plug-in hybrids seem normal.
Well, okay, this is the second generation of that car too.
Correct.
So they have had some time to smooth it out and make it drivable. Well, let's talk about the driving experience then. I mean, I've heard that EVs tend to be really torquey, lots of power off the line. Is that your experience?
Yeah. So coming from a 2012 Impreza with all-wheel drive to this thing, the 2012 Impreza I think had 140 horsepower or something like that.
I too have that exact car,
And around that in torque, I want to say.
It's
little more.
not a lot. I mean, it's an underpowered engine because they went for fuel efficiency in that car.
Yep.
That car is rated for 27, 30, 36.
Yep.
And that's about what I get driving it.
I was averaging 30 miles per gallon over a tank in my.
Same with me.
Yeah.
You put your foot in it, and not a lot happens. The CVT shifts and the gerbils wind up, but you ain't moving too quick in that Impreza.
Noise and fury and not much
As
else.
opposed to the Volt.
The Volt has about 300 pound-feet of torque.
300.
I can
My
light those
word.
tires up without even meaning to if I'm
So,
not careful.
I've had I think it was a 93 Thunderbird with a V8 that had 280 foot-pounds of torque.
I think this is 297,
Oh,
if I remember
brother.
correctly. It's got torque for days, and it only weighs about 3,500 pounds.
So, yeah, okay, you put your foot in it and you can really go.
It'll really go, but that really saps the battery, too.
Okay.
So, there is a trade-off there. If you're burning 140 kilowatts for a burst of acceleration, that sucks those battery cells dry
That
real
was
quick.
fun. My mile. Oh, I have no range. Okay.
Yeah, my range indicator is going faster than my speedometer.
So what about the flip side of this? Okay, so you can punch it and you can really go. So there's plenty of performance there. Not that you want to do that because you can drain the battery, but the flip side of this then is regen. You can regenerate these batteries during your slowdowns, right?
Yeah, and there's 3 methods to do that, and they all work in conjunction. So the Volt has has park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then it has L, which who knows what the L stands for because it's not like lower gearing or anything. It's basically regen mode, and it essentially enables one pedal driving. So if you're in traffic or you're around town and you're going stoplight to stoplight or whatever, you put it in L, and when you push the gas or the accelerator, I should say, you go, right? And, you have a kilowatt indicator. This is how much energy you're burning. And then when you let off, it's in this aggressive regen mode, and it tries. You rode in it. When it was in L, it was almost like the brakes were being pressed.
So the L is an aggressive regen mode, which when it's in normal drive mode, that's not to say it doesn't regen. It's just L is more aggressive of a regen.
Correct. Yeah, L can be used for speed control down hills. If you're really trying to regen a lot, what you can do is set the cruise control, put it in L, and then the cruise control will keep you. Say you're going down a 5 or 6% grade, right? It will regen as aggressively as it can while still keeping you at the specified cruise control speed. So you may be regenerating 25 watts or 14 watts.
So the
Kilowatts,
point
rather.
here, I mean, is there a time, when do you not want to drive in L mode then?
Basically, if you've got a big hill coming up and you're going down another hill, sometimes regenning down the previous hill doesn't do you a lot of favors. Let's say the speed limit's 40 and you're going down a hill, and then you've got another uphill coming, right? We've got these rolling sort of hills and everything around here. It sometimes makes more sense to be in regular drive, coast and get, maybe it's a 40, maybe get up to 45, 46 miles an hour, coast up the next hill as well as you can, and then use minimal power to crest the hill and get back to a flat or whatever. The highway, usually, unless you're in heavy traffic, the L mode doesn't make much sense usually, because usually you're going a relatively set speed. And generally, even down, unless it's a very large hill, you're using some power to maintain highway speeds.
So once you're familiar with the pattern of the discharge of the battery and the recharge of the battery, and kind of know what's going to happen next based on the terrain in front of you, you make, as a human, an intelligent decision. Should I put this thing in low regen and kind of... And again, the whole point of this is to maximize the amount of time you can drive without having to fire up the gas motor in this
Correct.
thing.
Yeah, and the third contributing regen method is there's actually on the left side of the steering wheel, the back side of the steering wheel, where the shifter was on the Impreza with the paddle shifter, is a regen paddle. So it applies yet more regen. So if you're in low and you're around town and you're coming up to a stoplight, you let off the accelerator, then you hit the regen pedal, you can come almost to a complete stop just on regen, and you're regenerating huge amounts of electricity. You can't quite come to a complete stop unless you're on an incline, but then all you have to do is tap your brakes and you're at a complete stop. You've then regened essentially all of the kinetic energy that you created by accelerating.
It's like a game. You got to understand exactly how to maximize the benefit of these different tools, which I suppose the more you drive it, the better you're going to get at this game.
Yeah, I definitely have gotten better in the 3 weeks. It's actually 3 weeks today that I've had the car. I've definitely gotten better at it, and it's very much like playing a video game. I compare it to a game called FTL, Faster Than Light, which is this little spaceship simulator where you have to manage all the resources of your ship and deflect shields, and it's very Star Trek-y, deflect power to the main shields and cut off life support, and it's not far-fetched from that, actually.
So let's talk about the interior then, and let's start with something you had mentioned a bit earlier. Whether it was this show or the last show, I've lost track. But if I'm running air conditioning, the radio, these kind of things in the interior, the headlights, is that all sucking my driving range down?
It is. Unless you're using high beams, the Volt uses LED lights. The high beams do seem to be regular incandescents because I think there's probably a lumen level limit that they have to set on the LED lights. But so the LED lights are very efficient. The daytime running lights are LED. The audio system does draw about 500 watts. So if I'm at a complete standstill, even without the AC on, whatever, if I've got the radio on, I see 0.5 kilowatts being consumed on the gauge cluster.
You listen to music loud, Eric.
It's like that, whether it's loud or quiet, Ethan.
Is it really?
Yeah, it really is. Because it pulls as much as it could theoretically need, I guess. So the AC system does seem to draw 1 to 2 kilowatts in full regular AC mode, but there's also an eco mode where it draws, I don't know exactly how much, but it's not ridiculous. I could be at a stoplight with the radio on in eco mode running on the AC on a 90-degree day this prior week, and using around 1.5 kilowatts.
Interesting, because it's interesting that the eco mode air conditioning is actually useful. I mean, you must feel some difference, but just by way of example, so I've got a Frigidaire air conditioner here in this office that we're sitting in, which isn't running now because it's nice and cool outside tonight. But if I put it in econ mode, effectively it doesn't do much of anything anymore. The compressor rarely cycles on, and the room gets quite hot. So I'm, a little mystified as to the usefulness of econ mode in that because it renders the AC useless. But it sounds like in the car they've got a better balance.
Yeah, I mean, so I've found myself in 3 different positions. One is trying not to use the AC at all, which in recent 2-3 weeks has been a little rough because it's been hot and humid
in
the 90s and humid. Then eco mode seems to be pretty much good enough. I really haven't used full mode except for on the 90-plus degree days, like right when I get in the car after work and it's hot. But if I rolled the windows down ahead of time, eco mode has really cut it. And, when I'm feeling especially type A about it, I'll cycle eco mode on and then cycle it off and let it recirculate the interior air.
Just how hyper-miley you want to go.
Yeah,
huh?
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, you mentioned that this driving this car is a bit like a video game. You've talked a bit about the screen that you're staring at. Talk a bit more about that. Now, I'm used to, like, in my horribly inefficient Forester Turbo, I've got a tach and a speedo and a gas gauge and odometer, pretty plain and normal stuff that most people driving cars are used to. Your car, like I said, I did get a ride and I got to give it a look, and it's basically, it looks like a big LCD panel.
Yeah, so there's the touch screen in the center console, and then the instrument cluster, or where the instrument cluster would be, is another AMOLED display that has, it's configurable. You've got, your speed, your heading, your what's on the XM radio at the moment. You can have your tire pressure. You can have, your tripometer, your odometer. You have on each side of the instrument cluster, the display is your battery level on one side and then your fuel level on the other. How many miles range you have in your gas fuel, your 87 octane gas, how much range you have left in your EV at your current expenditure and your historical expenditure over the course of since your last charge. It tries to estimate based on your historical usage. There's just so much information that can be displayed on this. Then in the center console, you can have where your energy is coming from. Is it coming from the battery, from the engine? Is it regenning to the battery? Is the engine charging the battery? You get a real-time feedback.
You get this whole status of the entire drivetrain.
Yeah.
Where you're charging or discharging, and again, whether or not that engine is running, which is surprisingly hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're like at highway speeds, you really wouldn't know. Over 35 or 40 miles an hour, you really don't know. If you're at a standstill or you're just putting around town and the engine kicks on, you'll feel the vibration. You may even slightly hear it, but it's mostly vibration that I feel in the steering wheel. And you said you didn't really feel it.
I wouldn't have known that the engine was
in
on
your
for
seat
sure
or whatever.
You told me.
So yeah, no complaints there. The touchscreen controls everything from your audio to, it has Android Auto built in. It has CarPlay built in.
Yeah. Auto was cool. You had it plugged into your phone. You had Google Maps there. You had Google Play playing music. And it was just slick as anything.
Yep, it works great. You can select, interactive text messaging that you can have voice responses to, and it'll read your text messages to you. So it enables actual hands-free.
Did you have to pay extra for that, or is that just the Volt just comes with that?
That's all standard.
Yeah.
The Volt comes with 5 years of OnStar Basic, which enables me to monitor my charging in real time. If the
monitoring with your phone, like with an app, you mean?
Yep,
or?
I have a phone that I can check. The status is it's charging. It'll be finished charging by X time. It's charging.
Oh, so you mean, okay, so, right. I picked you up before the show. Your car's at a charging station locally here. You can look at your phone right now, and because that thing's got OnStar Basic is good enough for this, you get all this status stuff?
Correct. So for 5 years, I'm good to go with this feature. There's, additional features that I don't really honestly care about. Navigation and 4G hotspot and advanced theft protection and all this that you can get that there's no way I'm paying a monthly fee for.
Well, there's not that many advanced thieves around here.
No, they're all pretty dim. So
They're all on meth.
So
Anyway.
let's put it this way: when you picked me up at the charging station, I had 1 mile of EV range, and that was 3 hours ago. About that. The car is now through my smartphone app. I can see that the car is charging at 240 volts. It is now at 77%. It was at less than 1%. And it has 48 miles of estimated EV range, and it will be finished charging by 12:30 a.m.
Nice.
So that's in an hour and a half at this point.
Nice. Okay, so here's another question. How has your driving style changed since you got this thing? Because we talked about the hypermiling. I guess, so let me tell you a little story here. When I got my Impreza, this is going back 3 years ago, I've since moved on to my Turbo Forester, as we know, but when I was driving the Impreza, fuel mileage was huge to me, and I had a lot of fun when I was commuting an hour each way, doing whatever I could do to improve the mileage. Drafting trucks at a safe distance, but still drafting the big semi-trucks and keeping my foot out of it, going slower than the average person down the highway.
Slow acceleration.
Right, going easy when accelerating. All those things really made a huge difference. I mean, substantial mile per gallon gains in that car. But after a while, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then you just drive the car.
And then you just drive the car as it is, and you're like, 30 miles per gallon over a tank's pretty good.
But the Volt, it really gives you a lot of incentives and encouragement to drive it like an old man, which I guess you kind of do.
Yeah, I totally drive like an old man now. So generally, the interstate near us, where I get on the interstate, the speed limit is 70, and I usually do 62.
You're that guy.
I'm that guy that everyone's angrily pulling around to pass at 90 miles an hour now.
In their big trucks.
Yeah. Or my daughter calls it the anti-Priuses. The big trucks.
Exactly.
And yeah, in the 55, I'm going 55, maybe 54, maybe 53, depends on how snarky I feel about everyone all the whippersnappers passing me. But it's a huge difference, just a few miles an hour. On a flat stretch, I can do 53, 54, 55 miles an hour for about 7 or 8 kilowatts. 65 is almost 14, 15 kilowatts.
I know from reading about gas fuel economy specifically that the amount of power required to go another mile an hour is on a logarithmic scale, not linear.
Right.
So the faster you go, the more power is required, substantially more. So it's a lot more power to go 70 than it is to go 60.
Right. Yeah.
And so in an EV, this is going to be even more sensitive.
Right. I mean, the same laws of physics apply. I just have a smaller tank of energy that I want to burn.
Yeah.
I do have that fossil fuel in the tank that I can burn if I need to. But
if the goal is don't burn the gas in the tank, keep it on EV power, you really got to play the game.
Yeah. So basically, driving in my, old man style, this morning I gave myself a challenge. I had 62 miles of predicted range. I drove 32 miles to work and 32 and change back on a single charge, except for I did burn a little bit of gas today. 0.06 gallons of gas I burned today.
6/100ths of, yeah. I started my car and burned that much.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, brother. All right. So what what happens to your range again if you're not driving like an old man and you start driving like a panicked soccer mom that's about to be overtaken by zombies?
It definitely goes down. If I'm being very careful, for instance, this morning I made it to work on 48% of a charge. If I'm not being terribly careful, and by not terribly careful I mean going 65, 67 miles an hour on the highway, I will use 58% of a charge going to work, 10 or 20% more. Depending on how careful I am or am not. Okay. But it definitely does make a big difference.
Again, not that you have range anxiety, but just if you want to play the game.
Right, yeah. Which I totally want to play the game.
Yeah. So okay, you joked about, I use 6/100ths of it. Well, I guess you weren't joking. You were just stating a fact. You use 6/100ths of a gallon of gas today. I mean, what kind of? I mean, how much gas are you putting in this thing?
I haven't yet.
Oh, you've had it for 3 weeks and you have yet to put gas in the tank.
Yeah, no. I picked it up on Tuesday 3 weeks ago, and I currently have 4.6 gallons left, which is half a tank.
And do you know how many miles you've driven it?
I've gone 781 miles
on
4.6 gallons of gas
and a lot of electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brother. Okay. All right. So you're recharging this thing regularly then?
Yeah,
you're
plug
doing
it
at home.
Yep.
Okay. So what's that system like? Did you do some dramatic charging station or?
Not yet. I use a standard 110 U.S. outlet.
Oh, like what everybody has. This would be like the basic rock bottom kind of charging.
I have an external, weatherproof plug outside that flips up to keep the weather out. But yeah, it's 12 amp, 110. And it takes a while, but if I get home at 5:30, 6 o'clock and plug it in, I'll be fully charged by morning.
Okay, so
it takes about 13.
I was going to say it sounds like 12 to 14 hours.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Depends on what else is drawing current and all that. If the circuit's pushing 108 instead of 110, and whatever. But
math,
it's so weird and hard.
So okay, so that's how long it's taken you, 12 to 14 hours on, or 12 to 13 hours to get a full charge. So it's pretty safe overnight. Would be kind of annoying if you wanted to like unplug and go get groceries or something, or if you're kind of a person that runs around town a lot. But if you just get home from work, plug it in, leave the thing alone till morning, you're good.
Yep.
And that's on the cheapest imaginable recharging system. But you could upgrade to something else.
Yeah. So for about $400 or $500, I can get a fast charger plug that just plugs into a standard 220 volt dryer outlet. That you can just run a line, 16 amp from your breaker, run it to an external plug this thing into it, and you're now charging at 220 at 16 amps, and that'll cut charge time down to about 4.5 to 5 hours.
Well, less than half.
Yeah.
So you're getting more amps and more volts.
It's almost a third of the charging time, and that's consequently what I'm plugged into right now at that credit union.
Right.
Okay. That's actually a 240 at 16 amps.
Okay. So that's a lot of current. And you think you go that route in the future?
I definitely will. I may not do it this year, but definitely in the next year I plan on doing it, because running the line isn't that hard. And then, for $500, the flexibility of being able to say, I didn't get home until midnight or whatever, stayed out late, went to a movie or whatever, I could plug it in and still have a full charge by morning.
Now, electricity is not free, at least not at your house. Do you have a sense of an impact to your electric bill yet? I know you haven't had the car that long.
So we haven't gotten a new power bill yet. I expect one fairly soon, but based on the reading that I've done, it looks like most people are seeing electric bill increases of $15 to $30 a month. Which
wow,
it's
very much.
It's going to be a third or less the cost of the gasoline that I was putting in my Impreza.
Yeah,
I mean, when you think about, I would fill up my Impreza every week for 12, 13 gallons. I think the tank, something like that.
Yep.
I'd fill up almost a full tank once a week, and I'm
At
doing the
gas
same
between $2 and $3 a gallon, depending. Right now, it's artificially
It's pretty
low,
cheap right now.
but
yeah. I'm doing the same exact drive, and in 3 weeks, I haven't put gas in this thing yet. So the gas savings are far exceeding the electricity bill.
All right, so you're away from home and you need to charge up. We've talked about this credit union that happened to be nearby us where you're charging up. Is that common? I mean, are there a lot of recharge stations, and how do you find them?
There's a surprising amount. The more rural you go, obviously, there's fewer. But I mentioned this in the content I like on Show 36. Plugshare.com is the site that I primarily have been using to find charging stations, and you can filter it based on plug type, compatible, charging stations. So you can enter in, I have a Chevy Volt. It'll only show me ones that are compatible for the Chevy Volt. In the Manchester area, there's several. In the Nashua, Salem,
Manchester, Nashua, and
Portsmouth.
Salem being bigger cities in New Hampshire.
Correct.
We
There's-
use cities loosely around here,
Yeah,
but
quote
yeah,
unquote cities.
higher population areas.
You go to Boston and they're everywhere. New York City, there's a ton of them. Montreal is unbelievable how many EV charging stations there are in Montreal.
Wow.
Not that I've been there with my electric vehicle, but looking at the map, they actually stop counting them on the map. Usually there's like, oh, there are 12 on the map that you can see right now. No, there's hundreds in the Montreal area. Amazing how many there are. So, yeah, you find a location. This site, if you're a member, it actually allows you to check in, give your estimated charging amount of time that you'll be there using the charger in question, so that people can see, oh, that's in use. It'll be available at this time. I'm not going to bother to go there. I'll go find another one. And there are different charging, there are different facilities can choose to give away the charging, or they can charge for a reimbursement for the electricity. So you can pay by the hour, you can pay by the kilowatt, you can, they can bill you however, or they can just say, use our charger, like the credit union, the local
Credit
union.
union is actually
This is-
free. You just go
Just
and plug
use
in.
this. We're trying to encourage people to use electric vehicles.
Because it's not the credit union is just the location. It has nothing to do with it's actually the a local electric co-op that is funding the charger.
I think so, but I'm not sure. It may be coming out of the credit union's power bill. I'm not sure of all the details. It's going to depend on the arrangement between the utility and the facility that's actually providing access.
We've said this before, but the Tesla charging stations that allow you to drive cross-country are not compatible with the Volt. They're unique to Tesla.
Correct. They are level 3 charging specific to Tesla vehicles.
Yeah. Are there any unique maintenance requirements for the Volt? Anything weird you got to do with it?
Nothing really. I shouldn't need my first oil change for about 30,000 miles.
Oh, okay. Because it's not an engine under a load.
Yeah,
in
right.
That sense, 'cause
It
it's not
doesn't.
coupled
It
to the
doesn't run
drivetrain.
much,
And it doesn't run much.
and based on that, it doesn't need much
So
lubrication.
right. So 30,000 miles, and a lot of those miles could have been pure electric driving.
Right.
So okay,
Brakes don't need to be replaced very often because I hardly use them.
because of the regen.
Yep.
So you're not applying brake pads to rotors to slow the vehicle down. You're actually putting engine through putting energy through the regen system that is coincidentally slowing the vehicle down.
Almost completely, except for complete stops, and then I push the brakes just to take 1 or 2 miles per hour off usually.
So the kind of things we think about as routine maintenance are somewhat lessened. I mean, of course, tires are going to be standard. That'll
Sure.
be normal.
That's
Rotation and changing them as required. All right. But oil changes and that kind of stuff is... I mean, does Chevy say they want you to bring the Volt back periodically to check things?
They, as part of the Chevy care for the Volt, because the Volt is kind of Chevy's baby right now, they actually give you a number of scheduled maintenance visits that are complimentary. They'll rotate the tires, they'll change the oil, they'll do this and that and a number of things. But other than that, I mean, there are very few moving parts that are in constant use. There's solid state motors that are being used generally. The battery doesn't really require maintenance. It's covered for 100,000 miles.
Which isn't to say it's an uncomplicated machine, but merely compared to a standard internal combustion engine and the systems that are associated with that, it is a somewhat less complicated machine.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Anything else that you should highlight about this car that we didn't mention?
I guess I would say how remarkable the build quality is, which I did not expect.
Again, our history with GM products.
Exactly. Getting into the car for the first time, I was struck by the attention to detail in the trim. I don't even have the top level model as far as trim is concerned. I don't have leather seats or anything. But you get in and you just go, oh, wow, they really thought about things. laying out where controls are and how, menus are navigated, and the quality of the ride. It's very smooth. It's extremely quiet, and not just engine noise. Road noise is extremely quiet. I had a buddy from work that was riding parallel to me on the highway, and I had my stereo on, but not very loud. And he was riding next to me trying to get my attention, and I wasn't paying any attention because, I'm used to people passing me and all this. And he actually got on his horn to get my attention, and I barely heard it because the cabin noise is so quiet. Apart from that, you charge the thing and you drive. Like, you learn how to drive it efficiently, and you charge it at night and you drive it. It's not...
So if I'm shopping for an EV right now, what recommendations do you have for me?
If you can't afford a Tesla, and you drive more than 30 or 40 miles round trip, I would say the Volt is a good choice. If you're around town and you do less than 40 miles, 50 miles a day, the Leaf might be good for you. It's a much smaller interior, but it may be fine. I could not be happier with my Volt, though, and I have not been paid by Chevy to say that.
No.
Although I would be paid by Chevy to say that if they wanted to pay me.
Just saying, Chevy. Call us. We know people.
We'll talk.
Well, thanks for listening to Citizens of Tech today. Remember to visit citizensoftech.com to find all of our shows about space exploration, tech of the past, gaming, computer stuff, nifty finds on Kickstarter, automobiles like our special today with Eric on his Volt, the future of power generation, clever science breakthroughs, and anything else that strikes our fancy. And, of course, you can become a Patreon subscriber because making podcasts is hard. Seriously, it's hard, so show your appreciation for our work with a little Patreon love. And, hey, there's rewards you can get as a Patreon patron, stickers and mugs and stuff like that. Show the world that you're a fellow citizen of tech. We'll see you in the next week or so, and until then, we're Ethan and Eric signing off, and we will see you on Reddit.